Fish Stripes Live. Welcome in. Welcome in on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch. Glad to have you in here previewing the Marlins versus Brewers series, the second leg of this long road trip. Eli Sussman here. We got Alex Carver from Fish on the Farm. We have Kevin Barral, our new intern here at Fish Stripes. We might be joined by Ethan Podowski later on as well, previewing this new series between these two teams, playing against a first-place team. The Giants before this weren't quite a first-place team, but just like the Giants, this is another club that has gone off to a really strong start to the season in the Brewers. And there's Ethan popping in as well. So we have a full house now.
Bad.
No, right on time. And we'll start. There's a lot to cover. Marlins versus Brewers. The past few years when these teams have met, it's been the Christian Yelich show. He's kind of been one man dominating the storylines and also dominating on the field, but he's not involved in this game. And we're going to start with the injury updates that came out today about the Marlins. There was a whole bunch of them right at the start of the pregame media availability. I guess we'll start with the good news, the relatively good news that came out of that, and that Brian Anderson is progressing, and that he started his light baseball activities after not really doing a whole lot the previous couple of days, and now presumably kind of on track to potentially rejoin this roster as soon as next week. So that would be a pretty big boost to have, because when you hear strained oblique, you kind of fear that it could be a long road to getting back. And even Mattingly was kind of reluctant to put an exact date on when they're hoping to have him back, but it seems to be progressing pretty well. But as for the rest of those injury updates, Ethan, why don't you just give us a rundown about where we're at with Starling and then with all those young pitchers as well.
All right, well, let me pull this up here. Starling, okay, so this was kind of interesting, right? So they get on and they say, Starling is still experiencing discomfort, and, there's no timetable right now. So obviously we kind of saw that he was going to be shut down for 7 to 10 days, and then they were going to figure out where his pain is at and then progress from there, hopefully work him back, whatever. So yeah, apparently it hasn't subsided yet, but Mattingly did say right at the end to give us a little bit of hope that Starling today, when he asked him how you doing, Starling, it was the first time that he had said better. So that's an encouraging sign that he kind of left us with at the end there. So that could mean that, the pain is kind of subsiding and he can start working back. So, there's 10 days. It's not going to happen. He's not going to be back in a couple of days. It's already been, I think you said 8, Eli. It's already been 8 days. He's not going to be back by the 10-day, minimum that he has to be down. So maybe 2 weeks, I would say, maybe 3. It's all depending on how much that pain subsides, when that pain subsides, and then how it goes once he starts working back and doing baseball activity. As you mentioned, Eli, BA started doing some light baseball activity, and they said he's progressing well. George Guzman is back after his what they called a minor setback. He's throwing at 60 feet, no issue. Eliezer Hernandez is throwing at 105 feet. He'll resume bullpen work this week. They want him to throw a bullpen. I don't think they've been saying that for a couple days now, but I think this will finally be when he throws it. Sixto is throwing at 60 feet. The last update, I think he was throwing at 45 feet. So that's good. And then Eddie Cabrera is throwing at 105 feet. And he's a guy that we thought was way behind, that, you're talking late summer with him. But being at 105 feet is a pretty good sign for him. So those are the injury updates for now. I'm sure more information will come about Eliezer. We'll certainly know when he throws a bullpen, which should be sometime this week.
Well, talking about Marte, I tried to lay this out as clearly as I could, that this would be a significant absence just based on what we've seen from other position players in recent years when they suffer like those fractured ribs or cracked ribs. That, at a minimum, you're usually out for 3 weeks. And in some cases, could be 4, could be 5. And so, even in a best case scenario with Starling, he seems to be a couple weeks away. And that's what made it so deflating, knowing that they would have to figure out a solution in center field when they don't really have a real solution until what they came up with finally or it's not really a shocking idea, but they finally took the plunge of trying out Adam Duvall in center field. And we saw that for the first time yesterday. We're seeing it again tonight. What do we think about that? I mean, he's the guy that has never started in center field in the majors before until this previous game, but he made one pretty difficult play in that game yesterday and a couple other really routine ones that give you some hope that, but even though he seems to be he's on the wrong side of 30. You'd think that his athleticism is slipping a little bit. And yet, I mean, this is such an important possibility that they have to keep one of their key bats in the lineup to, I mean, no offense, but take at bats away from Lewis Brinson and Magneuris Sierra and have a guy and just be able to realign everything, but to potentially give their offense, a fighting chance when we know that this is a super limited, a very short offensive lineup without without having Anderson and without having Marte and even without having Alfaro. That's a nice tweak that they made, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I thought he actually looked pretty good yesterday, and he not only that, like he has more speed than I thought he did. Like his sprint speed is like 91st percentile in the MLB this year, so his skill set can actually translate a lot better to center field than I was expecting. But yeah, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, Eli. Right? They had to take the sacrifice. They had to go with the offense because they just weren't getting anything out of Brinson, and that's a dead horse. That's a dead horse that we don't need to beat any longer. I think Twitter beats it too much sometimes, and there's no point for it. So I think that with Duvall, it allows you to get Duvall, Cooper, Aguilar, and Dickerson all into the lineup together. Hopefully get a couple of these guys in rhythm because none of them have really been in rhythm, especially Cooper. He's been in and out of the lineup so much, he was down and then he was hurt a little bit. And so he hasn't built a rhythm at all. So it would be nice to see him be able to build a rhythm now that he'll be getting some consistent at-bats, and Duvall being able to build a rhythm now that he's going to get more consistent at-bats, and hopefully all of a sudden you'll find all four of these guys hitting a little better because they're going to need it, especially if Marte is going to continue to be out an extended amount of time.
Yeah. I actually want to keep talking about Cooper. Cooper's been pretty good for the Marlins when he's in the lineup. Sometimes he isn't too consistent, but from what I've seen, he's been pretty good. And I think keeping him there at right field is going to keep him a lot more consistently batting, and he's going to get some hits. He's going to produce some offense for this team that we saw it in San Francisco, at least the first game. They had no offense going, and their offense has been lighting up at end of games. But I think Cooper could spark some offense at least in the middle of the innings or in the middle of the game, or at least at the start.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be frank with Cooper, he's been one of the more disappointing players on this entire team to this point in the season. I think we could agree on that, right? We thought he would be potentially one of the best hitters that they had entering the season. He had an amazing spring training, and he had a great 2020 season when he was actually available to play and didn't have COVID. But entering tonight, hitting 182, 286 on base, 273 slugging. I never thought I would see that for an extended stretch from him. And probably the biggest red flag is that he's striking out, 1/3 of the time. He's got 33% strikeout rate, which is that's the biggest shock based on what we know about him these past couple of years and based on what we saw in spring training. So for him to get potentially semi-regular playing time and figure out whatever it is that is off with his game right now, it's been a combination of things, I really think. But probably the biggest is simply just chasing pitches out of the zone that he has no shot at even making contact with, getting into bad counts, and then ultimately strike out. But he could be turning the corner, and they really need him to, because they've gotten great boost over the weekend from Jesus Aguilar finally looking like himself, and honestly this is even better than he was for much of last year when he's on this kind of power binge, hitting home runs in 3 consecutive games. But they need a little bit more power than just from him all alone. But I think people want to talk about Trevor. We should probably talk about Trevor, right? Yeah. Entering tonight, this is going to be his, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth, I think, right? Fifth start of the season for Trevor. And he enters today 1.64 ERA, 2.37 FIP in 22 innings. at least a few days ago, he was striking out more guys than any other lefty in all of baseball. And I know he's come up on our previous streams before, and Alex has an article that mentions him today on Fish on the Farm. And so I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about how things are going with him. That should we just expect more of the same in this outing? You think he could keep it going, have another? I mean, his last start kind of set the bar very high with 7 shutout innings, but you have confidence in him just keeping up what he's been doing so far?
Yeah, I do. I actually really do. As you mentioned, I wrote about this today. Why do I think this is sustainable production from Trevor Rogers? The reason why I think so is because of the pitcher that he's become based off of where he was in his minor league career. Eli, you probably remember, as well as I, when he was pitching lower down in Double-A, that he was kind of that more kind of control over stuff guy, right? Yeah, he had the big heat, really only had the one breaking pitch with the slider, so he really had to locate his stuff to be successful. The strikeout numbers were decent, but he really needed to locate inside the strike zone and challenge guys to be effective, and at times he got hit. So why do I think he's different now? And it's because he's going outside of the strike zone with this ridiculous changeup that I can't say enough about that pitch. I know whenever we talk about Trevor, I talk about that pitch, but the fact that he didn't have that pitch basically at all 2 years ago, and now it is where it is based off of everything that happened in 2020. Can't say enough, man. I mean, that's the difference, is that he has that confidence now that, hey, I belong in the majors. I'm here. I'm ready to go. I got not only 2 but 3 pitches. I got my 97-mile-per-hour fastball in my pocket. He's ready, man. He's here, and I think he's a strong Rookie of the Year candidate. I think he's going to surpass what I thought his ceiling was as a 2-3 starter. I don't want to get too far. It's 4 starts going into his 5th. But if he keeps up like this and he keeps getting those whiffs out of the strike zone, I mentioned on the site today that his whiff rate is 19%, which is 3rd in baseball. If he keeps doing that, he's a different animal, bro, and he may have ace potential. So, yeah, expect more of the same from Trevor tonight. Big matchup against Corbin Burns, so we'll see how he matches up there. But, yeah, I expect the same.
Corbin Burns.
Well, yeah, he matched up pretty well with Jacob deGrom, so I don't think he's going to be scared of Corbin Burns for a minute. But, I mean, not to say Corbin Burns hasn't been dominant, but I'm just saying, like, Rogers, he doesn't seem to fear anything from his demeanor when you talk to him. He is so cool, calm, and collected, kind of. This Milwaukee lineup is beat up right now.
Yep.
But they're playing pretty good baseball. They're not going to have Kane. They're not going to have Yelich. It's not, I think Yelich might come back in this series, but we don't know for sure. Jackie Bradley Jr. is not in the lineup tonight, but I know that I'm pretty sure Colton Wong has been hitting the cover off the ball recently, if I'm correct. Hold on, trying to find
their catcher. Their catcher has been really good. I don't know if he's going to play tonight because it's a lefty with Trevor, but I think Narvaez. It is.
Yeah, he's not starting today. We're going to talk about that guy, Omar Narvaez, who
is hitting 389 and slugging 574. And then Colton Wong is hitting 281 and slugging 469.
The Brewers' best players this year have been number 1, Corbin Burns, and number 1A, Omar Narvaez, who is catching most of their games, and who last year he hit not much better than like you or I would have. He hit like a pitcher last year, and to kind of really surprised people because he had a nice offensive track record prior to 2020, and now he rediscovered that, and all of a sudden he's playing great defense too. Like the rap on him early in his career is that he was a shaky defender at best, and that he did a lot of the little things wrong behind the plate, but at least he could hit at like a league average clip. And after a year that was just a total like reversal of what he had done. Like this year, he's just the best. He's the best catcher in. I haven't compared all the stats, but he's got to be up there with the most valuable catchers in baseball right now.
He's got 1.3 WAR.
Look at
his career best WAR is 132 games in 2019 with Seattle. He had 1.8. So I mean, he's had pretty good hitting stats throughout his career. Like with Chicago, a couple seasons, 101 weighted run created plus 121. And then he had that season with Seattle where he went for 1.8 WAR, where he had 119. But, I mean, yeah, this guy is tearing the cover off the ball right now. Let me check and see what he's doing among catchers. I'm sure that's the most WAR among catchers this year.
Not in the lineup tonight, but But we like this to be more of a series preview stream anyway, and I'm sure he's going to be starting at least one of the games, if not each of the next 2 games behind the plate. So he's going to be a big factor in this one because, as I think you guys alluded to, this is not a good offensive Brewers team. This is one that is being completely carried by their pitching staff. It's Corbin Burns. It's thankfully, the Marlins are missing out on Brandon Woodruff, who is awfully close to them in that category. They're even getting a good year from Freddie Peralta, who has taken a few years to really harness his stuff. And of course, their bullpen. I mean, those are where the superstars are. That's where Josh Hader is, and that's where Devin Williams is. Devin Williams, the one who won Rookie of the Year last year. And so to have those guys on the back end, to have Brad Boxberger, even Brad Boxberger, the former Marlin, he's working in middle relief for them. That their pitching staff is the strength of their team. For sure at this point.
Yeah, I mean, right now they're just one spot ahead of the Marlins in OPS. The Marlins have a 661 OPS, that's 25th in baseball, and the Brewers have a 664 team OPS, that's 24th in baseball. So this team is struggling offensively, and obviously we're running into them without Yelich, which helps so much with on the field, and then also off the field, not having to hear that. Obviously we're going to hear it, but he won't be out there, so he won't have to kill us and hear that narrative. But I think there's a chance he plays in this series, but he's not in the lineup tonight. But if he comes back, all of a sudden that makes this task a lot taller for the Marlins. But Trevor's up to it, and then who do we get tomorrow? Is it that?
I think it's Hauser.
Snyder spot tomorrow.
I think it's Adrian Hauser and Daniel Castano.
And Castano.
Yeah, Hauser and Castano.
Okay, Castano's up tomorrow. So, yeah, this team, I mean, we can talk about going to Burns, but this is going to be all about pitching in this series probably, and just whoever can get the most offense. Because if you can get some semblance of offense, like the Marlins really could have done really well in that series if they had any semblance of offense in that series against the Giants. They lost 3 games by combined 6 runs to a team that was pitching like crazy. So, this and a lot of those runs came late. So you can say that it was all like a lot of it. Some of it was garbage time, but I mean, the team was in every game, and so with a team that's not playing well offensively, you're going to have to look to your pitching, and you're going to have to hope that your hitters can step up just a little bit, just to be 1% better, 1% less worse than, as Stugatz likes to say, than the Brewers right now. And so that's just what the Marlins are going to have to do. They're going to have to find something in order to, be able to get 2 out of 3 here, because you want to get back on track and get 2 out of 3 and get within, a couple games of 500.
Just to mention something really quick that Eli hit on, the success of the Brewers pitching staff. Tie it in with Narvaez, 94th percentile in framing in Major League Baseball. The guy's having a ridiculous season so far. I know it's an early year, but 18 games, he's in the 94th percentile in framing. With, they have some great pitchers, great bullpen, but the back end of their rotation, probably not the best, right? So, yeah, for them to do what they're doing is crazy. And he's a big part of it. So we'll see him the next 2 nights probably.
Yeah, I guess he doesn't qualify because he's not on Fangraph's leaderboard right now, because he's played in 18 games, and then all the other catchers have more than like 65 plate appearances or whatever. But he would lead all catchers in WAR right now. He's at 1.3, and Real Muto's at 1.0, and then Yachty's at 1.0. And Colton Wong has also has 0.8 WAR this year early on. So
what is Chad Wallach at? Yeah, I mean that's been. I'll
look it up if you really want me.
I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we know that the Marlins catching situation has been frustrating, and the one guy that has some upside among their available options is the one that's not available right now. That's Jorge Alfaro. He wasn't mentioned in the injury update, so I think that would indicate that he's still a little while away from potentially coming back, even though he'll be eligible to come off, I think, this coming weekend. But yeah, it sounds like a significant hamstring time that we'll need to rest and then recover. So we have Sandy Leon in there tonight. And Leon, I think he made his Marlins debut the last time that Trevor started on that homestand. So it's another pairing of these guys who worked really well together last time. And for whatever it was worth, I mean, Sandy had a couple hits in that first game as well. Not expecting a whole lot from him offensively. I'm just I'm curious to see exactly whether this works really well again with Trevor, because the only thing holding Trevor back, Alex, you pointed this out in your article, that if you kind of just take out the very first inning of his season, and he's been like totally lights out. The only like any sort of issue that he's had this year was when he was struggling to find the zone in that very first inning of his very first start. And as long as he's actually aggressive in the zone and getting ahead in counts, once he has that, he has all the stuff you need to put batters away. And if for whatever reason he was facing a pretty weak Orioles lineup the last time he was in there, and maybe it was the quality of the opponent, or maybe it was just something hooking up with Sandy Leon that made him feel comfortable, that in that situation he was extremely efficient with his pitches too. It wasn't just like the low walks, it was that he was able to get through 7 innings on 80 something pitches. And that's something they'll really hope for again this time, because yesterday was, kind of a bullpen game for them. And they still have a few more days before their next off day, that if they're able to, probably even more so than pitching a perfect game and trying to put up all zeros, the most important thing I think is they want him to go 6-7 innings if he can
to eat.
Yeah, this could be a situation where maybe Sandy Leon becomes that personal catcher. We've been seeing that trend with Victor Caratini for Yu Darvish, Kel Higashioka for Garrett Cole. Maybe it becomes Sandy Leon for Trevor Rogers, if Trevor Rogers stays efficient like we saw with Baltimore. I mean, this is a guy who could be possibly maybe the third pitcher in this rotation if Eliezer doesn't come back right, or even the second one if Pablo Lopez starts to decline. Hopefully not, but this guy that's future ace potential. Maybe even, if he keeps going how he is, his stats are decently similar to Corbin Burns right now. That could be Cy Young potential, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I definitely think he has some Rookie of the Year potential, no doubt, this year. Everybody right now is obviously talking about Jazz, but it looks like these two guys, at least right now, are the leaders in the clubhouse to this point. But with Leon, there was really high praise for him after that first start from both Mattingly and from Trevor. Trevor said he took a lot of the thinking away. So he just went up there and just threw his pitches. And then Sandy says, about Trevor, he was so good. He was so locked in that I just put my fingers down and I knew the ball, he was going to execute the pitch. So they seem to be on the same page. They seem to be working really well together. Trevor had a lot of good things to say about him, and Sandy had a lot of good things to say about Trevor. So yeah, Kevin, I think I agree. You could possibly see a pairing here, like Caratini and Darvish. But for me personally, with the catching position, I don't know why they wouldn't just keep rolling with Leon right now. He's better. He's better defensively. He looks like he's better for the pitchers, and it kind of seems like everything that Wallach had going for him last year, which he did have legitimate things going for him. He was better with the pitchers than Alfaro was, but it just kind of all went away. He's been poor defensively. His framing hasn't been any good, and guys are. He's not really on, he's getting crossed up a lot. He's not really on the same page with his pitchers. So especially with Leon, showing a little bit more offensive potential. Neither of them have too much in the tank, but I think Leon is showing a little bit more offensive potential right now. I think obviously when Alfaro comes back, he's your guy that you got to ride with and figure this thing out and see if it'll work, because there is plenty of potential there. But, I would love to see when Alfaro gets back. I think it's the right move for the Marlins, and I think they're looking at it now where you could possibly see them going with Leon behind Alfaro instead of Wallach.
Kind of like what we saw last year with Chad Wallach going over Jorge Alfaro, especially at the end of last year with the playoffs. I think a report came out that the pitchers were more, comfortable with Chad Wallach. Maybe we could see now pitchers being more comfortable with Sandy Leon, and Leon just winning over that catcher spot, which I think he should have gotten it from the start, at least to be the backup of Alfaro, not Chad Wallach.
Yeah, he was good this spring. He had a nice spring, and so at the end of spring, it left me being okay, they're going to roll with Wallach because of what he did, at the end of the year last year. But Leon, if Wallach struggles, could really put some pressure on him after a good spring, and I think right now he might be putting some pressure on him if he can start putting some hits together for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yesterday's game, first time in Wallach's major league career that he allowed 3 stolen bases. Although I looked at the film, I went back and looked at the tape, and you could see that there's really only one of those that he actually had a shot to throw the guy out. And that was the one, it was a steal of third, and he was way off target with that throw. The other 2 weren't really his fault, but still the fact that this is a guy that historically has done a good job at controlling the running game, at least doing his part on that side of the ball, in the framing as well. The fact that he's way below average, and you really need him to be at the very least kind of a neutral in that aspect of the game to make him worth playing. And just honestly, there have been little flashes of Wallach in previous years where he does hit the ball with authority. He's had a couple really not just long home runs, but like stretches of consistent hard contact as well, both in previous springs and then in this little sample size. Like nobody would confuse him for Alfaro or anybody else that's like has real power potential, but that's something that definitely separates him from Leon. When things are going well, he has that aspect of his game that Leon doesn't have. The problem is that's been like totally absent this year. And maybe that's just because he's striking out all the time. Like he's not even getting in the counts where he's able to tee off. And so it's not showing up with him. But there's only so many years that you would stick with the same like backup catcher year after year. I imagine that if things keep up and I mean, right now he's just a big beneficiary of the fact that something we've talked about pretty consistently is how there's this kind of void in the organization in terms of who's the next man up at catcher when if Alfaro doesn't break through, if they eventually want to part ways with Alfaro, the problem is that you need to dig deep into the pipeline to find the next guy, where Will Banfield is definitely more than 1 year away, even if we think he might be able to put it together. And where the other catchers in the system just don't quite have any sort of starter upside, where they could fill in at the major league level at times, but not in a way that gets you really excited and that you want to plan around, which is, I mean, that's led us back to like all this daydreaming about how they're going to acquire a catcher and all the constant pleas for them to get the Cubs on the phone about Wilson Contreras. And I mean, unfortunately, I get why people want to talk about that, but it's April 26th. Nobody's getting traded for another couple months. No real impact player is getting traded for a while now, unless there's some crazy behind the scenes drama that leads to a breakup. That in the meantime, their options out there are pretty slim. I mean, they have Brian Navarreto in their minor leagues. He's not on the 40-man roster. They could bring him up at some point, but he barely has any major league track record, and they could do some dumpster diving and they could go into free agency. They could like pick on the waiver wire to get a Jonathan Lucroy or a Matt Wieters or some other guy in their mid 30s. That
Wieters is still out there.
I believe so. I'll have to triple check.
I didn't even know he was still around. Lost track of him completely.
He's right around 35 years old. I think a two-time All-Star switch hitter. But, I mean, the past couple of years, he was bouncing around with the Nationals and with the Cardinals. And when he got the chance to play, he didn't really do anything. So he doesn't have remember, he was supposed to be like the next big thing at catcher when he was coming up with the Orioles. Like, he was as complete as you could be for a catcher and prospect. And long career, but I mean, not quite long enough. And
Lucroy was a hot target at the deadline 1 year. The year he went to, I think he went to Texas that year. Yeah, he ended up in Texas from Milwaukee. But I mean, in 5 games he was hitting the cover off the ball with the Nats this year, and he had a good spring. So I was wondering, like, what is he doing out there? Like, why hasn't somebody picked him up? But he's really struggled the last 3 years or so. But yeah, I mean, there have been calls everywhere for us to go after Lucroy, but if they don't feel that he can bring more, true offensive potential, then there's no point in doing it. Really, you have guys like, it is a luxury to have a veteran guy like Leon who can just hop in and be really good, handle the pitching staff really well. But yeah, we've talked a lot about the catcher situation. It's pretty dire.
Too much. Yeah. Too much about
Too
that. Yeah. Midway through the show, Fist Stripes Live with Eli, Ethan, Kevin, and Alex. And I think we should, Ethan brought this up during the pregame presser, one of the few pressers I actually sat in on myself, about Jazz and his mini slump that he's in, the first kind of mini slump of its kind that he's experienced during the season. 0 for his last 12 with 6 strikeouts. And I think it's a good time to just put this in perspective that even with this mini slump for the season, hitting 270, 365 on base, 540 slugging, 4 home runs, 4 steals, that even with this like downtick and bring him back to earth a little bit, he's still on pace for a 30-30 season in his first full major league season. That
905 OPS, 905
Yeah.
OPS, 148 weighted runs created plus. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, if he ends up like even just on this pace, that he's an all-star and he's one of the best players in the league, and that the kind of numbers that he was putting up initially, where he was really at the top of the leaderboards just a few days ago in like every offensive category, that was unrealistic. And honestly, his numbers right now are really like a best case scenario if he keeps it up. That there's some room for him to, go through his natural kind of rookie roller coaster and still be this big success story. The kind of guy that, this organization has not had the past few years, a homegrown position player who's truly a big positive in all aspects of the game. And just people shouldn't be too greedy. I've probably mentioned this too many times already on the podcast about just trying to reduce expectations, to not call him a superstar right now until he has a little bit more of a track record. And that when it's all said and done, I think he settles in as being like a solidly above average hitter, but not necessarily a left-handed Acuna, maybe not quite at that level. That it'll be interesting to see exactly where he goes from here, because it wasn't just bad luck. I mean, there were some really rough looking at bats during that Giants series, weren't there?
Yeah, no, there were. And, it was like, even the games where he got hits, so he like led off 3 straight games with a hit, even then it was a 1 for 4. It wasn't a 2 for 3, with a walk after that. So there were some tough games, but yeah, Eli, it's ridiculous. He's still second in OPS among all second basemen in the league, and 5th in weighted runs created plus. So the problem is right now he's just striking out. He's just swinging and missing. He had some ABs where his eye has been so good, and he's been spinning on so many pitches, and he was chasing pitches that he hasn't chased all year. That was very surprising to see from him after what we've seen so far this year. But yeah, Donnie, when I asked him about it today, he said it's going to happen. It's part of his natural progression, right? It's part of the progression of a rookie. They're going to get really hot and they're going to get really cold. Hopefully it's just one series. I think that, I'm not going to lie, he looked really cold out in San Francisco. He looked kind of miserable on the field wearing his hoodie. And so, that could have had an effect on him. The conditions aren't great there for hitting anyway. I'm not going to blame it on that. He didn't look good at the plate, but I'm just saying that could have been possibly why he didn't look great. He didn't look comfortable, but the kid's going to be fine. If he's still hitting, if he finishes the year with a 905 OPS and a 148 weighted runs created plus, like that would be incredible. That would be rookie of the year type stuff for sure. So it was no surprise that he's going to come down to earth. And I guess I never really got what Donnie said out there, which is that last week we were all making him a Hall of Famer. We all had him in the Hall of Fame, and but he warned us there are going to be bumps in the road, and I was always aware of that. I not as much as you necessarily, Eli, but I was saying, he's going to have struggles, but this is really, really good right now. This is going to be one of these rough patches, and he's got some tough arms he's going to be facing this series. It's a team that pitches really well. The Giants have been pitching really well this year. A lot of their damage has come against the Marlins, but they've been pitching really well this year. So some tough arms that he's going to be facing, but Donnie said he's just going to have to make adjustments. There's patterns developing with how they pitch him, how they get him out. Teams are going to start noticing how to get him out, and he's going to have to start adjusting to that. That's what good hitters do. They pick up on a pattern, and they, make the adjustment, and they get rid of that pattern, and now you got to figure something else out. And while they're figuring something else out, they're just tearing the cover off the ball. So
here's the thing on this, and hopefully you were done, Ethan. I think.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of sum up, but yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, that he's gonna have to make the adjustments, and he should be capable. He made the adjustment from last year to this year, and so it's just something he's still hitting 270 with a 905 OPS, so it's gonna progress, and he's fine right now. What he's doing is still amazing. We knew he was gonna strike out a bunch, and he is recently, but. It's adjustment time.
Here's the thing on this, and I agree with everything you just said about adjusting. Here's the thing. He just faced the Giants in a 4-game series, right? Who did he face back in Miami for the first time? The Giants, right? Second time facing a team you got reports, you got video. Major league pitchers are going to adjust to younger hitters, and they're going to have a favor in that. It's like I said, it's the second time he's facing a team, not too long after he first faced that team, faced I think two of the same starters, if I'm not mistaken, and Sanchez and Wood. Am I right there? I know Sanchez. I don't know about Wood. I think Wood too.
Yep.
So there you go. These pitchers are going to watch film. They're going to adjust, and it's going to be up to Jazz to adjust to that. So that's what you want to see is the second time he faces these teams, the second time he faces these pitchers. That's what you want to see is can he adjust how they're adjusting to him. So it's give and take.
Yeah, and this happens to every player, not just Jazz. I mean, you look at around the league, and everyone's on a slump. Not everyone, but a lot of players go into slumps, and this is just one for Jazz Chisholm. He has to adjust, and it's like Alex said. I mean, pitchers are going to watch film. They're going to study where they possibly could swing, and they're just going to have to adjust, and Jazz has to adjust to what the pitchers are looking at from the film.
Yeah, as annoying as it is that, of course, Brian Anderson is out, the effect that has on the roster is that now Birdie is shifted to the everyday third baseman, and it essentially forces the Marlins to play Jazz just about every day as a starting second baseman, unless they want to see what they have in Devers. And we could talk about Devers, I guess, a tiny bit. That it was great to see him debut, but kind of unfair to him and kind of bizarre handling to put him in that situation. So, on days when they're not doing that, and maybe he starts like one more game this week before heading back down, that on almost every other day, I mean, Jazz is going to be in the lineup, and that's just long term. That is such an important step. Is just getting him as many reps as possible, and that just gives him more opportunities to make those counter adjustments and to see different types of pitchers, righties and lefties. Earlier in the season, he was sitting a couple times against left-handers, which you can understand that from a competitive aspect. And because when they had all these veteran position players healthy, that there maybe was a lineup that they thought was slightly better with him not in it for the first few innings. And now just kind of by necessity, he's in that position to play every single day. And ultimately, long-term, I think, not even long-term, I think you could just fast forward to later in the year that we might hopefully see exactly how he puts these experiences to work and kind of figures it all out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, what you want to see from him is the adjustment. You want to see him be able to use his amazing plate vision, which Donnie always talks about, stay back on the ball, not press at the plate, and really, just like we said, like me and Kevin said, just adjust to the adjustments. That's what you want to see the most. And it's not only the same teams that are watching these films. All the teams watch these films. So if they see a weakness in his swing, other teams are going to exploit that. It's going to be up to Jazz to close those holes.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to adjust to the adjustments at this point. I mean, every team, like Alex said, is just watching film. They're going to know what to expect from Jazz when he comes up to the plate. So if he makes adjustments, I think he could go back to what he was doing at the start of the season.
By the way, John Birdie, 5-game on base streak. I didn't want to forget to mention that for you, Eli.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about Birdie because even now the numbers are kind of underwhelming. I think I got to give a credit to Jordan McPherson of the Miami Herald. I think once every single game he takes the step to point out, hey, Birdie reached base in this game. Birdie did something small. He's doing little positive things every single game, even if none of them are. The one thing that was obviously one that had a huge impact was the home run against the Giants. The only run that they scored against Kevin Gausman on that night when Gausman looked amazing and had pitched arguably the best game of his career. And Birdie was the one that crushed the ball against him, and not even a cheap shot. I mean, any home run in Oracle out in San Francisco, in almost all cases, you really need to get into that. And that one cleared the wall by plenty. So that was encouraging to see. His first home run of the year. That's never going to be a big aspect of his game. It continues to be, I mean, it's honestly pretty simple that he's not getting on base, so he's not getting any stolen base opportunities. But yeah, he still has not stolen a single base this year in 19 games and over a dozen starts. So we hope to see that tick up a little bit because it's really that was such a big part of his value these past couple of years, that he is the elite of the elite as a base runner. He's the guy that's going to steal second and steal third and steal home if he's in the right matchup. And that's one thing that we're still hoping to see from him as a guy that has that very unique skill set. And the biggest thing being that versatility. That's the one that now gets him in the lineup every single day because he's a reliable third baseman in addition to being reliable at almost every single other spot. And just that other aspect of his game is to see whether that running ability makes an impact as well, especially, I mean, tonight is kind of a perfect example where even if I don't think Corbin Burnes is going to pitch a perfect game, knock on wood, that I think that they may, it wouldn't be a shocker to me that even with this lineup, they could scratch across a run or two. But I think a lot of that will have to do with how they handle things like that, like getting on base somehow. He's probably not going to, he hasn't walked anybody all season, so you can't rely on a walk, but eventually I think they're going to get a couple hits and get some base runners of some kind. And thankfully they have, in most of these guys, especially Birdie and Jazz, among others, and even Corey Dickerson. I think I should shout out Corey Dickerson, that I'm not even going to give a number to it, just by the eye test. I've been surprised by how great he looks running in different situations this year. He got that triple in San Francisco. A couple times that he scored on sacrifice flies on relatively shallow fly balls, that even for someone that is now almost about to turn 32 years old, that he is showing that he's still definitely an above average runner at this stage of his career. That they have a bunch of different guys that you would be fine with stealing a base in a critical situation. In this game, anytime that you get a base runner on against Corbin Burnes, that's going to be pretty critical, because you don't know the next time that you'll be able to do that. That's something I'll be looking out for, is whether anybody, once they get on, is given the green light to try to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, tonight's game is going to be pretty much a pitcher's duel. I mean, both of these teams are struggling offensively, and they're pretty much bringing out two of their best pitchers tonight. I mean, it's pretty much a pitcher's duel. Corbin Burnes has been great. Trevor Rogers has been great. I mean, you have to take over any opportunity you get when you're on base. So if the Marlins want to risk it to steal base, go do it, because you have to take these opportunities against Corbin Burnes, which has been one of the best pitchers in the MLB. So if the Marlins could take over an opportunity like stealing a base or anything, honestly, go do it, because this is a really good pitcher, and it's going to be difficult to score on him.
Yeah, as we look for this season, I mean, last year they were right at the top of the scale in stolen bases last year. I think this year they're now number 2 behind the Padres, but kind of a distant second place behind the Padres in stolen bases to this point in the year. And I mean, I guess we haven't talked much about them on the show, about the other center field options when Duvall is not in there with Lewis Brinson and Sierra. That, yeah, one of the big hopes of having their athleticism is not just defensively, but hoping that they would also be very disruptive on the base paths. And with them, it's as simple as if they're not getting on base, then they don't really have much of an opportunity to affect the game in that way. But both of them available off the bench. So I imagine if this is a close game, that they would be candidates to go in there in a pinch running situation. The unfortunate thing about, I mean, this lineup that they're putting together for this game, you could say that it probably gives them the best chance to win. It's just a really incredible contrast between the talent in the lineup and then the talent coming off the bench. Like, if you need, eventually, we don't think Trevor Rogers is going to pitch a complete game tonight, that if they need a pinch hitter at some point in this game, I mean, who do you go to that's actually going to give you a quality at bat? The choices are Brinson and Sierra and Wallach and Jose Devers, and that's it. And Pablo, and I guess Pablo Lopez. So it's Pablo, right? Pablo is your key pinch hitter off the bench in this situation.
It's just another reason why the Devers move is just so weird. Like, I wrote about it today in the same article that we were mentioning before about Trevor. It's just so weird because, okay, even if the Marlins misjudged Brian Anderson's injury, we know that's kind of a strange injury to gauge, right? Maybe they found out late that, oh, crap, he's not going to be able to play the next game. Even though he didn't play the last game of the Giants series, they were thinking, okay, maybe it's minor. We'll just give him a day off to rest, and he'll be good to go when we get to San Francisco. Of course, that's not the case, right? So even if, they get to San Francisco and they're like, uh-oh, he's not going to be able to play. I understand that they have to get somebody here on an emergency basis, but why wasn't another guy, and the name I'm going to go to is Isan Diaz, on the taxi squad with them in case that happened to San Francisco? To me, it says two things. Ill preparedness by Kim Ang, number one. And number two is, you heard Mattingly mention it today in the presser, Eli. He said he wants to get Isan at bats. I was so mind blown by that. I can't even tell you. He wants to get Isan Diaz at bats. Okay, Isan Diaz, what is he? He's 25 years old. He's played almost 600 career minor league games. It goes against everything this organization has done in player development to go to Jose Devers, a 21-year-old kid with 35 games at the single A advanced level, to go away from Isan Diaz and call up Jose Devers. Really weird. I still don't know exactly why they did that, other than the fact, like I said on your last show, they're out on Isan Diaz. And this, I think, further cements that.
The one thing I'll point out about why they're in this situation with Devers, I think I agree that under no circumstances they have to have Devers as this fallback option, that it should have been, by all accounts, Isan over Devers, if not for the fact that they do seem to be out on him, that they were in this situation because I think they have some candidates down there at the fish tank, the alternate training site, fish tank, where they had some guys that made a lot more sense for this position.
Sure.
I think Eddie Alvarez is probably the first one that comes to mind, where he plays all the same positions that Devers does, and he hits from the left side, and you're not expecting much from him, but you have no reservations about throwing him in there. And even if not him, they have also on a minor league deal Luis Marte, who has some AAA experience as well, and a whole lot of reps down there, same type of profile. But they were in the situation where the 40-man roster is full. And the reason why the 40-man roster filled up was because of the Alfaro injury. And then they had to put Sandy Leon on there. I think that you could trace this situation back to that. The fact that injury came up and all of a sudden they thought they had this one 40-man spot as wiggle room in order to bring up some of these depth players, whether these utility guys that can plug, whether it was Brian Anderson or just to be prepared for like any other injury, that someone like Eddie Alvarez would have been that guy that you put on the 40-man in this situation. And then once that player comes back from the IL, then you make a decision about whether to DFA Eddie Alvarez. They did that last year and they were able to keep Eddie Alvarez. So that kind of comes into play. That may have been like one of the scenarios they were looking at in their head. Right. And then all of a sudden they just do not have any wiggle room whatsoever. And they just don't have that. And they're stuck with candidates on the 40-man roster. And it still does not explain Devers over Isan, but that's kind of what limited the field of possibilities, I think.
I saw one possibility to get somebody not on the 40-man here. I was also looking at Eddie Alvarez. Another name I was thinking of was a guy who had arguably the best spring training of any prospect in Joe Dunand, who is another older guy. He's 25. Great offseason in winter ball. It's not on the 40-man. What can you do? Like you said, with the Alfaro situation, it's tricky. Can you free up a spot? I think they could have by performing one move, and that would have been to put George Guzman on the 60-day injured list. You could have maybe made it retroactive. We heard today that Guzman's back throwing. That's great for him. Glad to hear it. I don't think he's too far away from coming up and contributing to the bullpen, so that's great. But if you retroactively place him on the 60-day, he's only throwing at 60 feet. He's still going to be a while. You know that. And then you could get one of those guys on the taxi squad, be it Alvarez or Joe Dunand, or maybe Lewin Diaz. I think that was maybe farther away because he's limited offense or defensively, I should say, right? So, yeah, I think it should have been, if it was somebody not on the 40-man, Eddie Alvarez or Joe Dunand. And then if it wasn't one of those guys, Isan Diaz. But never in a million years did any of us expect to see 21-year-old Jose Devers. Hopefully Jose comes in and gets his feet wet. Another thing I worry about with such a young kid, Eli, and this will be the last for me on this situation because I already wrote enough about it, is hurting a kid's confidence. This kid's 21 years old. He's, like I said, the limited time above single A ball. He seems really mature. He seemed to go to work with his body a lot in spring training. You love to see that. That was kind of lacking. He's a little lanky kid, right? So the only other thing that I will worry about, and it just doesn't need to happen right now, is you kill this kid's confidence. He comes up and has these embarrassing at-bats that he had. I wasn't expecting anything more than that. But what does that do for his psyche? Maybe not too good. Hopefully I'm wrong, but we'll see.
It's just like I said in the last show. I mean, they probably saw something in Jose Devers that they didn't see in Isan, or maybe even in Eddie Alvarez, and they probably think Devers is the guy to win. I personally don't think. I think Eddie Alvarez could have been called up, or Isan, and maybe give Isan one last shot at the major leagues. We'll see what happens. I mean, Jose Devers can be a guy who all of a sudden just starts playing really good and really well. And we'll see what happens with Devers. It's a pretty interesting situation because it does spark a lot of questions about Isan and just the players, the infielders in the alternate training site.
Just to respond to that, and then we can move on, Eli, because I'm sure you want to. But if you see something, Kevin, in Jose Devers, that's awesome. I see a lot in him. I think he's a great prospect. I think he's going to be a good middle infield prospect, starting to play third base, what have you, right? he's 21, right? And he had that such a limited 2019 season and then no 2020. I don't think he played a winter ball. So yeah, I mean, if you see something in him, that's understandable, but you don't take that at a premature level and call him up at this point in his career over a guy like Isan or Dunand or Eddie Alvarez, who are those older guys. They've spent time at the upper levels. It just makes no sense whatsoever. It's a mixture of, like I said, ill preparedness and then being completely out on Isan. And like Eli mentioned, that room on the 40-man. And that's it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm thinking in the mind of probably Kim Ng or Don Mattingly of what they think. I personally think they should have called a guy like Isan or Eddie Alvarez up, or Joe Dunand himself, up to the major leagues.
Yeah, Ethan, we spent the last 7 or 8 minutes talking about the roster crunch situation, how they handled the calling up Jose Devers in place of BA and choosing him over Isan Diaz and the 40-man roster. And that obviously scared away a few viewers, understandably, because they probably don't want to hear too much about 40-man roster mechanics for the last thing on the bench.
It was just so baffling to me. I'm sorry to spend so much time, Eli, but it was just so weird. Anyways, we can move on.
Yeah, well, no, we're probably going to finish up pretty soon anyway. Only 8 minutes until first pitch at American Family Field. Which I think
it's not Miller Park anymore?
No, a couple years ago. And they chose that naming rights sponsor that you're not sure that it's an actual company or not. You think that it might just be
Guaranteed Rate Field.
Well, no, that one sounds
one of those.
Yeah, well, that one sounds sad. With American Family, it's so generic that you're like, what's going on? Where's the money? Like,
I still like it better than Lone Depot Park, personally. So I'll just say that.
Yes, yeah, fair enough.
Some parks just made sense. Miller Park being the home of the Brewers just made sense.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
It's kind of a stark contrast. You go from a beer sponsorship which made all the sense in the world, and now it's American Family Field. So kind of weird.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, money talks, and apparently this was, if we believe reports from the Miami Herald, they think that this naming rights deal kind of established the price for what Lone Depot paid naming rights in terms of how much money that those are the two most recent, I think, changes in Major League Baseball naming rights, and that's kind of why the price points are kind of similar with one another. So yeah, first of 3 between these two teams. Tonight, 7:40 Eastern, tomorrow at 7:40, and then they do a getaway day on Wednesday, 1:40 p.m. for that one. What are our just general expectations for how the Marlins are going to do in this series? We know that tonight is kind of a frightening matchup, but knowing that Christian Yelich is probably going to miss the entire series and Lorenzo Cain is out, and that the Brewers don't even have like a starter set for the finale of the series, that the Brewers are playing well. I think they're the second best run differential in the National League, only behind the Dodgers. But yet this is a team that definitely has it's an imbalanced team for sure. You know, they prevent runs, but you don't know how much they're going to score runs. But what are we expecting in terms of wins and losses in this series? And what are fair expectations for how the Marlins will do these next 3 games?
Well, Eli, I'm not going to lie. I'm surprised they have a good run differential because they don't really have an offense, but it must just all come from their pitchers. I'm not going to lie. Coming into this year, I was really low on the Brewers. Like, a lot of people were really picking them to make noise in the NL Central. They were picking them to be better than the Reds, the Cubs, even the Cardinals, who I thought were going to be pretty good this year. But the NL Central is a wash anyway. I mean, none of those teams are like really exceptional. But this team is off to a really good start. They're kind of like the Giants in that they didn't have very high expectations, but they're off to a really good start. But yeah, I don't know. Like, tonight is brutal. Tonight's just brutal. Like, you run in, you're struggling so much with the offense. You need to get off the schneid. Nobody can find a hit. And then all of a sudden you run into this guy. Like, it's either going to go exactly how we expect it, or the Marlins are just going to break out for a crazy, night and just shell him out of nowhere. Maybe he makes a bunch of mistakes. So Donnie said they noticed on tape that he's making mistakes. He says no guy is prone from not making mistakes. They just have to take advantage of the mistakes that he does make. But he's been pretty fantastic this year. So this is just like I said, it's just a brutal matchup right out of the gate for the Marlins as you're trying to get your offense back on track in a series against a team that should be pretty much on your level. For over the course of 162 games, maybe you think they're a little better because they have some star power. But here is an exciting player, and maybe Yelich comes back. This is a team that has some nice pieces, but the Marlins should be able to compete with them. Look, we said that the starting pitching is going to keep them in every game this year, and I don't expect anything less from Trevor. Castano just gets it done. I don't know how sometimes, but he just finds ways to get it done just to keep them in games. And then it would probably be Sandy in the finale, right? Do I have that right? So it would be Sandy in the finale, and that every time he's out there, he's going to give you a chance to win. And I actually still think he did that despite not having his best stuff the other night. So the Marlins should be in every game. It should be pretty similar to last series, but if they can find any semblance of offense, then they can very easily flip these results around and get a couple wins from here. And it would be really nice for the Marlins, just looking from the outside, at the overall picture of you struggle against the Giants and you're struggling a little bit recently, and obviously Marte and BA are down. It would be nice if they can pick up a couple wins and get back on track a little bit, because all of a sudden they're falling off that 500 pace that they should be setting for themselves this year. I think that maybe that's the high end of what the Marlins can do, is like win 81 games. And so if they want to sit at this 500 pace, they got to start making it back up, because they're 9-12 right now. So they're falling off that 500 pace a little. So it'd be nice to see them steal a couple games here, but it's going to be tough against Burns tonight. But we'll see if they can find some kind of offense in this series to get them going. And I want Jazz. I think Jazz has I think Jazz is going to have a bounce back series. I think he might hit the ball really well here.
Yeah.
I said earlier. No, you could go.
I'll be quick. The thing for me tonight is you want to get a great start from Trevor. He's been great these last 3 games. The first game too, aside from that first inning. But look what we had to do with the bullpen yesterday. If Trevor has a rough start tonight, which hopefully that doesn't happen, so we got to dip into that bullpen again, and they're waxed. We used 6 guys yesterday, I think, right? So you want to see a good start from Trevor. Hopefully he matches up against Burns. Hopefully we can maybe end this run by Burns tomorrow. That one's kind of up in the air. Can you get more than 5 innings from Castano? That would be nice, again, with the bullpen and how we've had to use them. And then Sandy in the day game. So, yeah, it could go one of 2 ways. Tonight's going to be tough. I think tomorrow would be the day to expect more offense.
Yeah, it's probably going to be the hardest night out of the 3. Corbin Burns has been lights out. It's just about taking opportunities, especially in this first game. You have to take opportunities. A Marlins team that has not been good offensively as of late. Now's the time to take the opportunity. If you have to steal base, as I said, you have to do it. And Trevor Rogers, if he's lights out, I think this should be maybe an extra innings matchup, hopefully. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll find out in a few moments. Cut it off right here, just so that we can settle in time to see Jazz hit his leadoff home run again tonight against Burns and light everything up. Thank you guys for following all our content on Fish Stripes here on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, on our website, fishstripes.com, on our podcast. Very special guest coming up on our Thursday podcast episode. I think it's probably my favorite guest that we've ever had on our podcast. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a nice tease for the 7 people that have stuck around all the way to the end to get the first tease about our special guest coming up. So thank you, Alex, Ethan, Kevin. I'm Eli Sussman. Go Fish.